Welcome to the Deltarune Iceberg, Tier 1, Jevil. Jevil is the secret boss of Chapter 1. By his name, we can tell he's a mix between a jester and devil, and one of the more iconic characters in this game. At the time of writing, he's also the only secret boss to get a plush. Yeah, I know Spamton's there, but it's not the boss form. Anyways, Jevil stands out as one of the more iconic characters in the game, and is one of very few characters in Undertale and Deltarune that actually has voice lines. Through some dialogue, it's revealed that before the events of Deltarune, Jevil was the court jester of Card Castle, and was friends with Sham, the court magician. They performed acts together for the king until one day, Jevil came across a, quote, strange someone. Ever since Jevil met this person, he had descended into insanity, viewing everything as a game and his actions as without consequence. At some point after meeting this strange someone, the royal magician Sham would seal Jevil away in a dungeon, by orders of the kings. Jevil, however, would believe he is the only one free, being in the dungeon. Well, when Kris and Susie enter the Dark World, team up with Rousey, and get down to this dungeon, it's revealed that they need a key to get into Jevil's cell. So to get the key to the cell, they need broken parts A, B, and C. To get the first part of the key, you have to talk to Sham, and that's where most of Jevil's story gets revealed. Sham says, one day he met a strange someone, and since then, he began to change. He started saying bizarre things that didn't completely make sense, but didn't completely not make sense either. Soon, he began to see the world as a game and everyone as its participants. As the court mage and his only companion, I was forced to lock him away. Or rather, lock us away in his own words. Since that time, the strange words he said have stuck inside my cotton, and my view of this world has become darker yet darker. Reflecting on these old memories, I think perhaps I miss playing games with him. The phrase darker yet darker is a big standout in this dialogue. Obviously, Sham misses his friend and had to lock him away, but outside of just missing him, his whole worldview got, quote, darker yet darker. Line obviously primarily used by Gaster in Undertale, in Entry 17. So if the thinking the world was a game bit wasn't already odd, this makes it stick out a bit more. A lot of fans believe that the person to corrupt Jester's mind was Gaster. There's some more stuff about Gaster later on, but I'll get to that. Going back to the key, after retrieving the 3 key pieces, Kris takes them to Malleus, who combines them into a single door key. The smith then warns a party of the evil energy the key holds, and advises them not to use it. After you use it on Jevil's cell, a smaller door materializes and opens, and Kris, Susie, and Rousey all get to enter. When inside, Jevil waits at the far right of the area, and wants to play a simple numbers game. He continues, saying, when your HP drops to 0, you lose, before starting the battle. And that's odd that he even knows about HP, considering most NPCs in Undertale and Deltarune don't at all, aside from a very select few. But there's more to this battle. Aside from the hypnotic background of this fight, the actual music for it has a secret. If you watched the last video, or honestly any non-gameplay video of Deltarune or Undertale, you'll know that Toby Fox uses motifs to make connections. And I won't go super in-depth with examples here, but basically, if that pattern in the music is used in another song, it's done intentionally and used to show some type of connection. And Jevil's battle theme shares the same motif as Gaster's theme. If you listen to the two here, it's identical. But that's not the only connection to Gaster in this fight. In one of the attacks, Jevil has a variant of the spinning ducks that looks just like Everyman, an amalgamite that showed up in the Reaper Bird fight in the True Lab in Undertale. The True Lab being where Gaster worked, and created the machine that scattered him all across time and space. Everyman also shows up in other parts of Deltarune, like in graffiti in this alleyway, Chapter 2's pop-ups, but being here is a bit of an odd placement. When you eventually defeat Jevil, you'll get one of 2 outcomes. If you spare Jevil, you'll get the Jevil's Tail, a piece of armor. If you win through attacking, you get the Jevil's Knife, knife. When you get the knife though, he tells you to take him with you. So the knife he turns into, the weapon used throughout the fight, you just take with you. You're taking Jevil alongside you. In both endings of the fight though, he mentions the knight's hand is drifting forward, and also says we won't be having pleasant dreams, because a nightmare will awaken in our hearts. And that's really all we know of Jevil so far. There are some connections between Jevil and Gaster that are odd. I wouldn't say enough to certainly draw any connections yet, but it is something to kind of think about. Jevil is for sure one of the most interesting secret bosses, and I'm sure Toby Fox isn't done with him yet. The Knight. The Knight is the main antagonist of Deltarune. They were hinted at in chapters 1 and 2 and made their first full appearance in chapter 3, the end of chapter 3 when they killed Tenna. The Knight seems to be the driving force of the Roaring. The Roaring being the apocalyptic event foreseen in the prophecy of the Deltarune. Rousey, the one who knows most about the prophecy, describes it as, "When the light is subsumed by shadow, when the fountains fill the sky, all will fall into chaos. The Titans will take form from the fountains and envelop the land in devastation. The surviving Darkners, crushed by the darkness, will slowly one by one turn into statues, leaving the Lightners to fend for themselves, lost eternally in an endless night." So yeah, a completely world-destroying event. The actual identity of the Knight is highly debated. While the Titan we see in chapter 4 seems to be its own being created by too many dark fountains being made, the Knight seems to be someone. And there's a lot of theories as to who this someone is. The most common theories I've seen are that it's Des, Noelle's lost sister, Asgore, Papyrus, or even Gaster, or any member of Noelle's family, because of the very clear antlers. What we know for certain is that the Knight is the one who created the Dark Fountains as seen in chapters 1 and 2, and is trying to bring about the Roaring. The identity, which I'll talk about now, is still all speculative. So let's go down the list. Whoever the Knight is must meet a couple criteria. They must have enough determination to make a fountain. For example, I doubt Mouse, as adorable as he is, would be able to be the Knight. He just wouldn't have the determination to make a dark fountain. And 2, Susie saw them take Undyne out into the light world and into the bunker, so they can't be a Darkner. Or if they are, there has to be some weird thing letting them go into the light world. Alright, here's the contenders. Papyrus. First off, Papyrus looks oddly similar to the Knight. The whole body structure is near identical aside from the horns at the top, but since it's revealed that the Knight is wearing a helmet, we can disregard that for now. It may just be a part of the armor. But aside from the general shape of Papyrus's body and being similar, he's conveniently missing at points throughout the story where you should have been able to see him. When you ask to hang out with Papyrus when talking to Sans, Sans says you can hang out with him tomorrow. And the next day, when you go to see Sans at the convenience store, he says, "By the way, about my brother. It seems like you won't be able to meet him today." Yeah, it's a bummer when things don't work out. Sorry about that. I'm sure you'll meet him someday. Maybe around the time when your brother comes home. So this could be that he's busy with making a dark fountain in the library that day. Papyrus also isn't home if you check his door to his house after you visit the church in chapter 4, before going to Noelle's place. In this instance, going off him being the Knight, this would mean that he's heading to the church to set up the next dark fountain. And since it's shown that Sans and Papyrus had just recently moved into town, that'd make sense as to why Susie didn't recognize him when chasing after Undyne being kidnapped. But that could also just be Susie not getting a good look. Papyrus certainly has the strength to carry Undyne all the way to the bunker. As it's shown in Undertale, he's shockingly strong, just too innocent to do anything. This theory does have a good chunk of evidence, but I don't think Toby would have made the Knight someone we hardly ever get to see mentioned, and someone who seemingly doesn't play any part in the story so far. So what about Asgore? Asgore, we know, was formerly the police chief of Hometown, then was replaced by Undyne. It's theorized that the reason he was kicked off the force was either because he was involved in the disappearance of Des, Noelle's missing sister, or was looked at as insane by everyone when believing Des was in the dark world through investigation. It's hinted that the divorce between Toriel and him was because of an investigation, and Kris seems to remember their father's obsession with the case. Specifically, in chapter 3, when looking at this board drawing all these connections, one of the few actual Kris thoughts we see is, "You don't really like looking at this type of thing," in parentheses. This is further supported by Undyne laughing at your face when you bring up the Dark World. If Asgore was really onto something, finding out Des was in the Dark World, everyone must have thought he was insane. It would also make sense that Asgore has the different parts to the code of the bunker, being the previous cop for the badge symbol, being previously married to Toriel, who was very religious, and he still goes to church during the nights, as said by Father Alvin, for the church symbol. And as for the pine tree and mare, Asgore is best friends with Carol, who's the mayor and went to college with Rudy, so he'd be very close friends to the Holiday family. Plus, we know that Carol and part of Kris are working with the Knight. So Asgore being friends with Carol and dad to Kris, that makes sense. So Asgore being the Knight could be some sort of really messed up way at getting back at everyone, showing that the Dark World is real. But that seems out of character. Asgore, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, loves Kris, and Toriel as well, even if they are divorced. I believe the connections between Asgore and the Dark World are extremely important, big ties in this investigation board of finding out who the Knight is, but I don't think it's Asgore. The person who I do believe the Knight is, and what seems to be the most popular theory, is Des, Noelle's sister that's been missing for quite a long time. Outside of the December family talking about it, it's implied through other forms of media like the Deltarune website that she's lost in the Dark World. If you visit deltarune.com/des, the track Lost Girl plays when you click on the guitar. The same guitar that Susie plays for Noelle in Chapter 4, that Carol gets extremely mad seeing Susie using. There's also inaccessible bits of dialogue in every chapter of Deltarune that seem to be from Des. You can pause and read if you want, but overall it's mainly Des calling out for help, being trapped in complete darkness, and she doesn't know how long it's been, possibly years. This ties into the dialogue that Spamton has in Chapter 2, where he kinda shuts off and gets dialogue from someone else, asking for help. So it really seems like Des is the one trapped in the Dark World. Noelle has also talked about what she's like, saying she was always super protective and really just a great older sister to her. So much so that Noelle is trying all the time to find out where Des went. In Chapter 2, when Queen made a room for everyone based off their search history, Noelle's room had a calendar with every page being marked December, and every day being the 25th, December holiday, Des being short for December. Since the whole family is based off Christmas themes, Rudy is Rudolph, Carol, Christmas Carol, and Noelle is French for Christmas. Noelle's been trying her best for ages to try and find out what happened to her sister. And outside of the text in the files and Spamton's dialogue, there's some more hinting at her being in the Dark World. In Chapter 3, if you input 1,225 points into this vending machine, December 25th, 1225, you can enter the Gumball machine. And inside is a secret room, a room that's playing the Lost Girl track. And it oddly kind of resembles the dog room that was featured in the Undertale stream. I don't think there's any connection at all, but I thought that was interesting. But it's a massive room that's filled with red carpet that you don't have to walk on. There's no collision whatsoever. And there's also not much in this room, aside from a single gumball machine. When you interact with it, it says, "You used the machine. The capsule came out." Inside was something hard like lacquer. It was a small, dark triangle. You tried to take it, but it slipped through your hand, and you couldn't find it anymore. You couldn't find your hand. So this triangle-shaped object, alongside with the music we know is from Des's guitar, is very much implied to be a guitar pick. So we know Des is trapped, lost in the Dark World. What makes her the best pick for the Knight? There's a lot that just adds up. I mean, appearance-wise, having antlers alone makes anyone in the December family a likely candidate. As we've seen with characters like Kris, Susie, Noelle, when someone enters the Dark World, their appearance doesn't really change all that much. It's mainly things like clothing, not really body type. Some fans have pointed out that the Knight's weapon also looks a lot like a wiffle bat, something Noelle described Des using to beat up Kris with. Circling back to the dialogue with Des in the Dark World, while we know she's lost in some place that's dark, it may not be the generalized Dark World. Like how Spamton tries to take Kris's soul to gain the determination to create a dark fountain, the Roaring Knight may have done this with Des, meaning the dark area she's trapped in, the place where she can hear scratching from the dialogue in the files, may literally be inside of the Knight. The Knight could be this other type of being trying to bring about the Roaring who simply took Des's soul. That would also explain the monstrous form the Knight can turn into. I doubt a normal member of the December family could turn into this and still be alive. We also know the King in Chapter 1 despises Lightners, so him adoring the Knight, it would make sense if the Knight was a sort of Darkner-like creature to begin with, and the whole reason Carol is presumably helping the Knight would be through her being manipulated. I mean, it's clear the Knight does that a lot. Taking a look at King, Queen, Tenna, they do that a lot. And credit to Gloop on this next couple of pieces. I didn't realize these connections until watching his video on the Knight. But the Knight's Crystal Nova attack also looks extremely similar to Azriel's. Someone we know has a very strong connection with Des. Sharing similar attacks would make sense. Personally, I believe that Des is the Knight. It's not confirmed by any means at all. There's lots of debate to be had, but a lot seems to be pointing to it. I could also see arguments for Papyrus in particular. His shared appearance to the Knight and being gone at the most convenient times is really odd, but I welcome any discussion about it in the comments. Eggman or the Man Behind the Tree? The Man Behind the Tree, the Eggman, is an odd character. The only way you come across him are by doing things you'd never expect, such as in Chapter 1, you must enter and exit a zone of the Dark World over and over, and only after so many times will you be transported to this secret room. All that's in this room is a tree. Behind it, a man we can't see. When we talk to them, it says, "There's a man here. He is behind the tree." Well, there's a man here. He offered you something. Then, if you hit yes, you receive an egg. Then the man disappears. The description of the egg item reads, "Not too important, not too unimportant. The only thing you can do with this egg is place it in Asgore's fridge. Then it'll duplicate itself." In Chapter 2, a similar interaction can be done when going between two zones in the cyber world, except this time there's a hint on the wall with graffiti of a tree. Once you enter this tree world, the dialogue changes. When approaching the man, it says, "Well, there's a man here. He might be happy to see you. What do you think?" If you say yes, you silently receive yet another egg. Then the interaction turns into, "Well, there is not a man here." In the light world, you can use this egg like last time, but instead of duplicating it in Asgore's fridge, this time you place it inside of Sans' convenience store. As Susie says, reverse stealing it. Up to this point, all the Eggman was a simple, somewhat game-breaking feeling, well, Easter egg. Chapter 3's egg interaction, though, is entirely different. This time, in one of these Zelda-like segments, you have to throw this blue box across a river and just leave. This is a setup for later on when you go into one of these segments again, but this time you're on the other side of the river. The games in Chapter 3 never really connect like this, so this one's a big standout. But outside of the setup, the whole interaction with Eggman is way different. Before getting to the big area of this chapter's Eggman section, you first have to chat with this old man playing the game alongside you. You're able to talk to his in-game version of himself, and he's shocked how interested you are in where you are. He says, "Where could this be?" "Nowhere." "No, this is somewhere." "You're very interested in going nowhere, aren't you?" Well, he leads you on a bit of a search for a ticket of his to get to nowhere. You end up finding it in a wardrobe that appears when you're not looking. Once obtained, the description reads, "A ticket to nowhere." It shows a map pointing to the left of a red X, and then you save the ticket for later. Once you encounter your next Ribbits fight with these trash cans, there's a new option in the Interact menu, Croak on X. You hit it and bam, you end up in a place called Man Country, a Game Boy colored island with 6 Ruddins and, like the last time, Eggman. These Ruddins are different aces that Kris copied when younger to cheat at cards, and colored them different colors, which, yeah, Kris didn't get too far with that cheating. So, onto Eggman. Once you go up top and meet him behind the tree, he says he's always forgotten, and that you'll forget him too. He says this island is what the whole world used to look like, before the world was covered in water and dinosaurs, an ice age. Then he cuts himself off by saying, actually, there still are dinosaurs. Is it mixed up? In any case, this island is the only place left I can talk. He asks if you understand, and if you say yes, he responds with, "Funny, I haven't the faintest clue what it all means." He says one day this island will disappear, and asks if you wish to meet him again. If you say yes, he responds, "Oh joy, I'll tell you my schedule. Listen carefully. On Thursday, I go to sell the donuts. On Friday, I toss the leftovers in the dumpster. On Saturday, I let it cool on the windowsill. On Sunday, I harvest the wheat. Hold your breath, head to the left, and count backwards to 100. He then gives you an egg and says the island will disappear soon, and that you should leave. You may forget him, he may forget himself, but he'll remember your kindness," he says. Before finally leaving, he states, "If you will it, we shall meet again at that place. Whether 11 hours or 11 years, Deltarune will be waiting. So take your time, wash your face, and get dressed." Then the man disappears. The egg you obtain from him you can't use somewhere like with the others. It just gets added to Temmie's desk alongside the other 2 so far. Lastly, for Chapter 4, it's just like the first 2 appearances of the Eggman. In this long hallway, if you head up, right below this window, you'll enter a room that has a bookshelf. On the shelf is a book that reads, "And so wept the fallen star, making rivers with its tears. Then slowly, from the bitter water, something grew. It looked like glass." Then, if you continue proceeding to the right, you see a mural of a house and 2 trees, with text above it saying Roots. To the side, a philosopher NPC. He says, "I heard something in between. Something in between. It was mixed up." If you then repeatedly enter and exit this area, just like chapters 1 and 2, you'll get transported to a secret room. This one, very odd. There's a Rudin secretary, and they state the patients are waiting for you. Off to the left are 3 doors, and only one of them you can enter. The one you can enter having a tree drawn on it. In this room is darkness. There's nothing to see, only things to interact with in the dark. There's a sink, to start off, pointing out that it might be weird to have an area to paint if you couldn't wash your hands. Then you can come across the making of a painting of a tree without the bark drawn on. The person painting then notices you and asks if you're there for the art club. The art club is, quote, "where we draw pictures and don't kill each other." They say not to look at what they're drawing since they're not finished yet, and they have no memory of how they got there. They were in a rush and wasn't looking where they were going at all. In the left side of this room, you can interact in the darkness, and it'll say, "He is behind a tree." So, the man is back, and he's pointing at something, nodding, off to the side of the canvas. If you decide to draw when prompted, Kris picks up the pencil and begins sketching what they saw behind the tree. But as they sketched, the line began to err, as if the pencil had lost its way. They kept trying over and over until perfecting it, getting the sketch done in a single wild line. But with how many layers of attempts were drawn on top of each other, it was only a monochrome smear. Next, a tree was painted over it, painted over everything, leaving nothing but a simple still life. After all, there was nothing to look at in the room besides a single tree. After the painting was done, the egg appears on the easel. You pick it up, check back on the man, and he's gone. Then, if you interact with the sink again, Kris tries to wash their hands, but the graphite never seems to fully go away. Once you go to leave, the secretary asks how it went, saying art is therapeutic, asking which one of you was a patient anyways. Those are the interactions of the Eggman. There's many theories as to who this man is. Obviously everyone eyes Gaster off the bat, but I don't think so. Gaster has a very unique style of speaking that isn't replicated by this Eggman. While doing research for this entry, I came across a video by The Bee's Knee that describes the entire existence of the Eggman and his island to be not connected to the lore. Instead, they believe that they're a representation of Easter eggs and the joy for hunting for them, and I completely agree. Like I didn't mention in the last video because it sorta defeats the purpose, but I guess it's been long enough. There is an untitled sound file in Undertale called ABC123A that is someone talking about how it's impossible to have secrets in games nowadays because people will simply post them online. Whoops. But I believe this sentiment that Toby Fox has was carried on into the making of the Eggman. The process for even finding the egg is reminiscent of the original Easter egg in Adventure, and all this Easter egg was the developer's name. Just a name, but it was secret and sounded like a playground rumor to try and get to. The head of Atari, instead of being furious for putting something not planned into the game, realized how good of a feature it was for games, so instead of removing it, it was encouraged for future development. The idea of hard-to-reach secrets in games would have people playing their games more, and that's a good part of what made Undertale popular. Obviously, it's not just that, the music, story, gameplay, I mean, it's great without any of these secrets, but you can't tell me watching those game theory videos as they came out didn't keep you completely hooked on the game for way longer. Well, this island seems to be a representation of games when they had a lot more secrets, or mystery to them. It's harder to have Easter eggs like this and them not be spread all throughout the internet on launch day. The island disappearing could be a show of that era of secrets and games going away, spreading the eggs throughout the light world being a way of helping spread the sense of mystery. In Chapter 4's encounter, it's shown that these egg encounters may be a way of Toby communicating with a player, expressing his own opinions and likes outside of an already phenomenal story. Quote, art is therapeutic, creating something over a monochrome smear of influences. I don't believe the Eggman is Gaster, or a character like Gaster. I don't believe it's necessarily a character at all, as much as I believe it's simply a way to invoke some type of mystery and convey feelings to the player. This is further proven by the Valentine's letters sent out. In Valentine's of 2024, Toby Fox sent out different Valentine's Day cards to subscribers of the newsletter, and most of them were simple cards by characters like Sans, Queen, people like that, and you only got 3 out of many. One of these many, though, stood out. Much longer than the rest, and not signed by anyone, was this incredibly long letter. It reads, "It's a strange letter. It's more or less completely illegible, but if you squint your eyes, and squint your heart, For some reason you feel you can understand it. Well, Happy New Year. Or was it the old year? Well, in any case, how was Deltarune? As you are waiting patiently, the time is going around. There was even a rumor of Valentine's Day. How absurd. Every day is a day of love, if only you believe it so. Do you believe it so? So, the purpose of the message, I want to help. Yes, there was someone I wanted to help. I seem to have forgotten who. Yes, it was quite ironic, but I seem to have forgotten. Was it myself? No. Well, perhaps. Regardless, when I see them, I'm certain I will know straight away. I never forget someone I don't remember. Will you help me? You were very odd, responding out loud to a letter, but you seem reliable. I will be counting on you. Now put on your coat and wash your face, or put on your face and wash your coat. Not necessarily in that order, or in any order at all. Goodbye. There was a sound like something walking away, and the letter was gone. This letter already sticks out by the length of it, but the whole structure of it and how this writer talks is different from the rest. And the line, now put on your coat and wash your face, mirrors a line said by Eggman in Chapter 3, wash your face and get dressed. This seems to be the same Eggman character that Toby is using as an outlet. The letter seemingly reflecting the frustrations of Deltarune taking so long to make, and the audience, the players, being the main reason it's still in development. The character of the Eggman, if you could call him that, is an incredibly intriguing one. I've not seen a character like him in any other game, and I'm super excited to see him in Chapter 5. Apparently harvesting wheat according to his schedule. But we'll have to wait and see. Let me know what you think in the comments of this character. I'd love to discuss it with you all. And after all, it could totally just be Gaster. Dead Pixel. It seems to be a running joke by Toby Fox to have a dead pixel in every boss fight in Deltarune. A dead pixel, if you don't know, is normally an actual pixel of a monitor that gets stuck and won't change color. Well, in every big chapter fight so far, there's been one in-game, just programmed in instead of an actual monitor issue. In the fights against King and Queen, there's one on your side, underneath Susie, and in the fight with Tenna, there's one right in front of his face. Even going against a Titan, there's one right in front of the Titan as well. The ones for Titan and Tenna only appear for a few frames, but Toby, I guess, still wanted to include it as a joke. Or I at least assume it was a joke. I can't imagine he's accidentally left in a broken pixel for every single boss fight. Spamton Sweepstakes. The Spamton Sweepstakes was a charity event where people would donate money to the Child's Play charity, and for every $1, you'd get an additional entry to the Spamton Sweepstakes. And just like the recent Undertale anniversary stream, the goals were crushed. They raised $317,000 out of the $250,000 goal. Outside of the amazing donations that legitimately helped a lot of people, the different rewards for the sweepstakes were pretty insane. There were gift cards, little accessories, a banana, and even one of the rewards being literally every single piece of Deltarune merch available at the time. Yeah, insane charity event that just blew all expectations. And there's a lot of stuff within the actual site that hosted the event that I'll talk about in later entries. And like I mentioned, there was a recent Undertale anniversary stream, again for charity, and it just destroyed their goal, raising $361,000. The Depths. This is the image file when you start Deltarune. It's called Depth, and like mentioned in the last video, there's a lot of stuff you could theorize in this part of the game, but this is just about the fact that we actually found the original image for Depth. The way this effect was made in the character creation screen was by having a single image, then flipping it 3 times to create this weird image we have here, and it turns out that the original image is of an ocean. Makes sense with it being called Depth. But yeah, if you connect these images here, it's flawless. It's a stock photo from a Matthew Kozlowski, just of the ocean. It's really not all that often that we see where developers get assets like this, so just coming across the original image for one of the most important parts of the game is kind of insane. RV Pine. RV Pine is a YouTube channel that shows progress on a Deltarune fan game that's been in the works. And some fan games are certainly impressive, but what they've shown here made me and everyone else incredibly intrigued. Progress of the game seemingly started around December of 22 when this video titled Vision Cruise Chapter 3 was released. It was a short bit of a work-in-progress fan game that had Susie and Kris waking up in Chapter 3, not knowing where they were, and it ended pretty quickly, only being around 3 minutes long. But it dragged in a good amount of attention, enough to turn the project into Vision Cruise Deltarune Alternate Chapters. where there would be a alternate version of every single chapter, and when chapters 5 and future ones came out, they were going to stick to their own story, not needing to rely on 5's layout. They released more videos, a look into their new shop, a new sneaking section of the game, and even a secret boss that looked really unique, and was a complete bitrate killer. That static is actively destroying this video's quality. So where did this all lead? Well, it got sort of cancelled. Taking a look into the Game Jolt page reveals that there was some issues with the team, like some members not working out, burnout from programming so much. It was a lot. But now it seems as if the project was shifted into more of a standalone project, that in my opinion I'm a bit more excited for. There's only 3 screenshots, but it shows that one of the playable characters is gonna be Des, and I don't know. I think they could do a super interesting story with that. I'd definitely keep your eyes out for this game, but it'll still probably be a while until we get any more news on it. Big Shot Soda. Big Shot Soda seems to be a massive inspiration for our Cromer-loving friend Spamton. Spamton constantly repeats Big Shot when talking to you, and Big Shot basically just means being successful or important, and it seems to be a reference to this Big Shot Soda. I'm showing an older commercial for it right now, and it seems to be an inspiration for the making of Spamton. Outside of the clear name choice, the actual appearance of the mascot on the Big Shot Soda is somewhat similar to Spamton. A lot of fans have speculated that Toby Fox at some point probably came across this soda in his childhood and just decided to make an entire character off it. Looking at these old commercials for this soda, it is really weird. I could totally see Toby Fox making a character based off their mascot, Onionsan. A good chunk of the characters from Undertale make an appearance in Deltarune. The main ones, like Toriel, Sans, Alphys, ones like that make very obvious appearances, but there's a cameo from Onionsan that you have to go a bit out of your way to see. In Chapter 1, if you go to the lake in the eastern part of town and stand on the circle for around 8 seconds, Onionsan will appear. They'll ask to be your friend, and once you tell them your name, they say they've forgotten their own name since they don't talk to anyone. You can name them either Disgusting, Beauty, Azriel 2, or Onion. And they thank you for whatever name you give them, and you can talk to them the next day. For day 2, you have to go there with Susie. Onion gets nervous and Susie just leaves. Well, Onion talks about hearing a song underwater, a song they've heard from the sea, but you can't remember it fully, so they decide to investigate, and end up leaving to do so. You get to return in Chapter 4, and the song that can be heard underwater is mentioned again, but not by Onion. Right before ending Chapter 4, you can sit near the edge of the lake with Susie, and she'll mention the song. Unfortunately, Onion's nowhere to be seen. There's also a strange interaction where, when you go to respond to Susie here, Kris talks with her mouth closed, like some part of them is refusing to let them talk to Susie. But I'm sure Onionsan and this weird interaction will be brought up more in Chapter 5. Deltarune was worked on before Undertale. I mentioned this in the last video, but Toby Fox's original vision for a game was of Deltarune. He obviously put tons of love and effort into Undertale, but his dream project that he's been working on since 2012 is Deltarune. It was made before, alongside, and now after Undertale. To put that into perspective, my little sister wasn't even a year old when Deltarune started development, and now she just started high school and finished Chapter 4 for the first time. That is a long time, but clearly worth it. SALOT. SALOT, or Say A Lot, is a YouTube series where YouTuber Revtrocity voice acts different characters from Undertale and Deltarune. The actual series of Say A Lot started around 6 years ago, with a video of Rev voice acting as Jevil, saying, well, a lot.
Invest in egg whites. I'm not even joking, by the way. The stock market value of egg whites has gone up in the past 5 years, so if you did invest, you were making profit. I'm just saying. Not financial advice.
But the channel's first upload was of a comic dub that was pretty similar to Say A Lot. So basically, they've been doing it since March of 2018. But yeah, the Say A Lot series is a long-running one and has a lot of dumb quotes that'll just get stuck in your head. Materia Collective. Materia Collective is a publisher and record label for all of Toby Fox's music, and normally they're fine, like they do their job just publishing music, but there's been some rough patches of harsh copyright enforcing. Like a while back, they were kind of like Nintendo, just copyrighting everything with their music and making it awful to have anything Undertale or Deltarune related on YouTube. I remember when uploading my last Iceberg on Undertale, I had to re-edit the entire music track probably 3 to 6 times just to avoid copyright. it can be extremely rough. Oh, and they also leaked a ton of songs for Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 before release. Reverse Undertale. So this is probably one of my favorite entries. Some fans of Undertale and Deltarune have realized the games very much parallel each other in more ways than just characters and music. It's not super concrete proof really, but the way the areas and chapters are laid out in both games are almost exactly opposite to each other. Reddit user ShowenSmearPip made this image and did a pretty good description of their parallels. Chapter 1 and Area 6 are both medieval themed, with Chapter 1 literally being a kingdom. Both have a king that have gone mad, both have a friendly, relevant goat character, and fourth wall breaking bosses that have kind of lost it. Chapter 2 of Deltarune and Area 5 of Undertale both have a very big focus on machinery and computers. They have a similar color scheme and both have tons of green text everywhere, scattered across different signs. Mettaton and Spamton both end with ton, but also share extremely similar looking bodies. Chapter 3 of Deltarune and Area 4 of Undertale both have the scariest, most terrifying creature, water coolers. Both have a TV character hosting a show, taking over the flow of the entire area they're in, and Mettaton wears the same exact suit as Tenna, both having a mini-game and musical scene as well. Both sections also have big hot areas, the actual hot lands, and the desert in the game for Chapter 3. Lastly, Chapter 4 of Deltarune and Area 3 of Undertale both have literal waterfalls, similar color schemes, insanely big lore drops, big focuses on overworld challenges like climbing and spears, and both have Gerson. We'll have to wait and see if this trend keeps up with future chapters of Deltarune, but as of now the parallels are kind of insane. It makes sense with Deltarune being a weird mixed up spelling anagram of Undertale, so having these odd parallels everywhere was most likely intentional, but I'm super curious to see if Chapter 5 may really be like Snowden. Mad Mailer. Toby Fox released some concept art of Deltarune, and in it was a character that didn't get implemented, called the Mad Mailer. Toby said these characters, alongside Mad Mailer, ended up getting scrapped because they would have conflicted with the existence of Kun, Spamton, and Mouse. But we unfortunately don't know a whole lot of what these characters would have been like. The only other thing that Toby said about them is that the Mad Mailer's tie would have been prehensile, or someone with a normal vocabulary would say, it grabs things. Yeah, I had to look that word up. But these characters would have been really good in game. I guess Chapter 2 is kind of already filled with a lot of different enemies though. Full Power of Neo. Just like how there were cut enemies for Chapter 2, there were tons of cut music tracks. Like one of them was called the Full Power of Neo, the one playing right now. Toby said after creating Undertale, one of his goals for Deltarune was for players to finally be able to challenge a real version of Mettaton Neo that didn't just end in one turn. So he created a few music mock-ups for an extended version of the Power of Neo, but he was never able to make a version of the song he was satisfied with, so it ended up getting scrapped. Eventually, when the boss concept evolved into Spamton, the music changed as well. It sucks that this track never made it into the game, but at least he still put it out there for us to listen to. There were a ton of other songs that ended up getting cut like this one, but he also just made those ones public. Undertale Fan Soundcloud. Undertale and Deltarune fans have a tendency to be extremely creative people, and with that creativity, some music ends up getting made from it. Specifically on SoundCloud, there was a big trend of tons of fan tracks for Undertale, lots of them using the same types of software Toby Fox used, and they sound very similar. And they're not your average, just kind of bad track on SoundCloud. I'll have a link in the description for a really good playlist of them if you want to listen. I highly recommend. Medusa Queen. Some of the concept art released for Chapter 2 shows the original design of Queen, and she looked a lot different. It was a very Medusa-inspired look, and honestly most of it just looks way creepier. Some people have speculated with the snake-like appearance of her towards the bottom of this concept art that she was going to be way more like a snake overall, instead of how she is now, just looking kind of like a human, and it would have been awesome to see what that looked like. The Medusa-inspired head was already very creepy, but the body could have potentially been different as well. Queen basically got an entire overhaul, and just like with the Full Power of Neo track that ended up getting cut, Queen has one too, the one that's been playing for this entry. Mike. Mike is Tenna's assistant in Chapter 3, and before the release of Chapters 3 and 4, people were theorizing what Mike was going to look like, just like they did with Tenna. There were a ton of different designs of what Mike could look like, and Toby Fox didn't want to disappoint. So in Chapter 4, when you do come across Mike, yeah, there's 3 characters that are pretending to be Mike. each of them representing a different fan theory of what Mike would look like. We have the small Mike, that's the theory of Mike being a microphone, the cowboy hat Mike that represents the Woody theory, which came out of Toby Fox's Tumblr post of a grayscaled Woody with a distorted "You've Got a Friend in Me" song playing. But instead, it just says, "Friend inside me." And there's a whole rabbit hole with that, but for now, that's all I'm going to say about the theory. And then lastly, there's Cat Mike. That represents the theory of Mike being based off of the image friend character that shows up all around Deltarune and on the Spamton Sweepstakes site. After the 3 mics are revealed to be fake, if you go off to the right, you can encounter what I personally think is actually Mike, a massive microphone. An oddly intimidating, massive microphone. Knight shut the door in Chapter 1. One of the theories of who shut the door on Kris and Susie at the start of Deltarune is that it was the Knight, whoever the Knight is. We've seen at the end of Chapter 3 that whoever the Knight is can exist in the real world, when they kidnapped Undyne. But as to who actually closed the doors on Kris and Susie here, starting off the events of Deltarune, is still unknown. It could have been the Knight, sure, but it could have also been any random person walking into school. Why they'd lock it behind them is beyond me. It could have been a school staff member just making sure no one goes in there, but you'd think they would have seen Susie and Kris. So maybe it was the Knight. I have a feeling whoever locked the 2 of them in there will either be some type of massive reveal later on, as a big lore drop, or just never be mentioned, and written off as just some random person. Festival is winter themed. So for this entry, in Chapter 4, there's no school, but the day before there was. So we're going to assume Chapter 4 takes place on a Saturday. The schedule of the Eggman, as previously mentioned, seems to confirm this. And since the festival is said to be tomorrow in Chapter 4, that would put the festival on a Sunday. This matters later in the entry. So some people think the festival is winter themed, some don't, but what do we know about it? We know Carol ordered Ice Wolf to buy a bunch of flowers from Asgore for it, and Asgore expects it to be a lot of them, a big order. There's a smaller Ferris wheel than the one in Chapter 2, Rousey expects ice cream from it, and the whole town becomes a carnival. Also, typical Christmas decorations were being put up outside the mayor's office in Chapter 4, and when checking Jackenstein's Lightworld form, it was noted that it was probably for the festival as well. But obviously that's not Christmas themed. So it kinda seems that this could be some type of transitionary festival, if that makes sense, having aspects of Halloween and Christmas going from fall to winter. We don't know for sure if this is a case, that the festival is going to be some type of transitionary period, but we have seen some hints as to what Chapter 5 may entail overall. Without a doubt in my mind, there's going to be a Dark World section. I mean, there hasn't been a Deltarune chapter without one, so we'll include that in this little theory. In Chapter 4, with all the different panels of the prophecy, one of them reads, "The Flower Man Trapped in Asylum," with an outline of Asgore holding a flower. And with Gerson's prophecy and his secret fight mentioning a field of pink and gold, and an inferno of jealousy, this points to a flower-themed Dark World connected to the festival. A Dark World possibly created within Asgore's flower shop. I think that's most likely what the theme and, I guess, overall layout of Chapter 4 is going to be like. Like I said earlier, it takes place on a Sunday, so it might be a bit of a stretch, but in Chapter 1 it is mentioned that Asriel is coming home, quote, next week, and Sunday is technically next week. So there could be a chance we see him, and that it's tied into that prophecy of Asgore holding the flower. But that's a bit of a stretch. I'm hoping for it, but I wouldn't bet on it. Neo-Dark Worlds. In Chapter 2, Queen says a Neo-Dark fountain will be created. Fans immediately speculated what a Neo-Dark World would look like, looking super deep into this, but in reality, I really just think it means new, like the definition of the word. Just like with Mettaton Neo, the Neo part stands for Mettaton's form being the newest form. Kind of unfortunate, since a different type of Dark World would be really cool, but that might be a bit needlessly complicated. I really just think the Neo part of what the Queen was talking about here stands for new. Unused Cowboy. Chapter 3 had a portion where Susie and Kris were riding on a horse Rousey as a part of one of the mini-games. And that's cool and all, but it seems as if a lot of cowboy-related content was scrapped. Left over in the files are animations for Kris, Susie, and Rousey all being able to walk around in this old western theme. It was revealed in a newsletter that initially there's way more to do with this cowboy segment, and that the whole part almost got scrapped. I believe there was probably a fully walkable, bigger segment being made, but there just wasn't enough time to finish it. I mean, the assets are still there, at least we can see them, but it kinda stinks that we won't get this fully fledged Cowboy segment like initially planned. Tenna design and border. When Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 were announced, Go Nintendo put out an article talking about it, and most of it is just talking about what the game's gonna be like, why it's priced the way it is, stuff like that. Well, at the bottom are some screenshots they got, pre-release, and fans before Chapter 3 had released had a lot of different fan designs of what Tenna would look like. Everyone was super excited to see what the design of him was gonna be like when the chapter fully released, but in these screenshots Go Nintendo put out, this image of normal Chapter 3 gameplay was released. The only thing being is they're using one of the borders that shows Tenna's design. So the first ever official appearance of Tenna is from a Go Nintendo article, just accidentally leaked. Oberon Smog. YouTuber Jaru had a theory on who the knight would be that got insanely popular for being very out there. This Oberon Smog, as mentioned in the entry name, was the theorized identity as to who the knight was, being an anagram of Gerson Boom. Now there was some stuff that could point to Gerson being the knight, but it was chalked up to being an insane theory, and this Oberon Smog became kind of iconic for it. As we saw in Chapter 4, Gerson did come back, which was a kind of insane prediction by Jaru. He's certainly not the knight, but it was insane seeing that Jaru wasn't completely off base for his theory. He also, outside of this theory, makes really good videos. I highly recommend you give them a watch. Specifically, there's a multiple hour long video covering every single NPC and how likely they are to be the knight. Super interesting. Spamton Cat. YouTuber Half-Bred Chaos was a very prominent Undertale and Deltarune theory and myth-busting YouTuber. Unfortunately, they haven't released a video in about a year, but before this recent drought of content, one of their most popular sorta theories was Spamton being a cat. Yeah, and it sorta makes sense too. The way the enemies in Chapter 2 are programmed is that every single one has a different element that affects resistances to different types of attacks, and the mannequin and frayed bowtie give resistance to Spamton's attacks, which is odd. The only other two enemies these armors give specific resistances to are Task and Task Manager, Task's elements being Electric and Cat, and Task Managers being Order and Cat, meaning these armors give resistances to the Cat element type. And if you look at how Deltarune is programmed, the element 6 is given to Task, Task Manager, and Spamton. Element 6 is the Cat type, Spamton has element 6, Spamton is canonically a cat. Paper Trail. Paper Trail is a 640-page Deltarune fan comic. It's just beyond impressive, and it's obviously really long, so I'm not going to do a big story deep dive here, unless you guys want that in a future video, but I'll have the link in the description. This, alongside Kris Does Surgery, are some of the most impressive bits of fan content made for Deltarune. I highly recommend the read. I'm currently going through it myself. Very good so far. Going to bed in the beginning. At the very start of Deltarune, when you're woken up by Toriel, you can actually just go straight to bed. This trend stayed for Chapter 3 as well. In both cases, if you go to sleep, you skip massive portions of the chapter. If you do it in Chapter 1, you skip the whole intro with the school, and end up straight in the Dark World. If you do it in Chapter 3, you skip straight to Tenna's games. They're pretty much just for new playthroughs. Jevil's voice actor is Toby. Not only is Toby Fox the voice actor of Jevil, but he's voiced every named character so far. That means Jevil, Queen, Task Manager, Spamton, every single voiced character, it's him. And it is extremely hard to tell. Papyrus dialogue noise. So far, Papyrus hasn't appeared in Deltarune. People have speculated as to why, one of the biggest reasons being people saying he's a knight, but no matter what's going on, I believe we'll see an actual appearance of him in a future chapter, because the text sound for him is in the files of Deltarune, same as in Undertale, probably put there super early on to use in the future, or to mess with us. This wouldn't be the first time that something was put in the files just to not be used, but I'm really hoping this means we'll see Papyrus in future chapters. That's why, okay Kris? At multiple points throughout Deltarune, Ralsei is telling Kris something, and all we, the player, see is the end, where he says, "That's why, okay Kris?" or a similar line. We know something is going on with Kris. I mean, we don't really play as them. There's a strong disconnect between us and Kris, mainly shown in Noelle's house, but yeah, we're missing out on some, I assume, very important dialogue, maybe about the prophecy. And as seen by the end of Chapter 4, Ralsei is specifically holding it back from Susie. So we'll have to see what else he's been holding back in the future chapters. I mean, the ending of Chapter 4 was already insane, with him holding back so much of the prophecy. Thank you so much to my friend BushBaby29 for help with the iceberg. Also shout out to random guy who got on one of the icebergs I combined for this video. And that's it for the Deltarune iceberg. This video had a sort of prequel in a way. I covered Undertale and a good bit of Deltarune in a video before this, so if you want to know more, here's the video. I recommend the watch. Tons of weird stuff in there. But I don't want this to end. I've had so much fun making every iceberg video, but the ones on Undertale and Deltarune have been by far some of the most fun I've ever had with video creation. There's still a lot more to talk about, like why Gerson knows so much, the secrets of the Spamton Sweepstakes, Snowgrave, who Image Friend is, but that's all I can cover for today. I plan to at some point do a completed version of the Undertale and Deltarune videos where I combine them and then probably add like 30 minutes of stuff like Image Friend that I couldn't cover. If that's something you guys would want to see, let me know. But yeah, I don't want to waste too much of your time, so thank you guys so much for 10,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, week, month, and I'll see you in the next one.